So let's start talking about how you're going to get started with Revit. Okay, so I think the main thing we're going to focus really on today is the Revit interface. All right. So when you, good morning. When you open up Revit and you don't have a file open, this is the page that you see, right? And this is just sort of the, we'll call it the welcome page, the Revit startup screen, okay? And there are a few areas in here that I want to define. We have the projects area, we have the families area, and then we have the recent documents area in both of those sections, okay? So if you want to open up a new project, create a new project, or use a project template to start a brand new project, or open up an existing project, this is where you're going to do it, essentially. So we can use these links right here, and if I click on one of these links, I can open a file, and it will ask me to browse to wherever I want to open that file, right? If I click on New, it will say, hey, you want to create a new project? Great. What template would you like to use to start that file? So I can choose from here. And if you notice these files right here, those are the same as these files right here. All right. And then I have the shortcut link to each of those templates. So this is sort of the long way of going about getting to these templates right here, right, by clicking New. But I can also just click on one of these and a Revit file opens. All right. The same thing happens down here, except this area is for families. So this top portion is for projects, brand new working files, projects that you're going to create construction drawings in, okay? And this bottom portion is for, it serves the same purpose, but it's for families. And families are, if you want to talk about it in terms of AutoCAD, right? I compare a lot of things to AutoCAD. Families are like blocks, okay? And if you haven't had AutoCAD, a family is essentially a collection of 3D objects that, you know, has parametric relationships to one another that generate kind of everyday objects for use in your model. So things like tables and chairs and doors and windows, right? Those elements that get hosted into your model, those are families, all right? So projects, families, we have all of our open navigation here, file creation here. And then over here, we have our recent documents area. So this area is both a blessing and a curse, in my opinion, right? What's nice about it is that if I'm working on the same project over and over and over and over again, when I open it and I save it, it starts to show up in my recent documents. So when I want to go and I want to work, I can come up here, I can click on it, and it opens up that file that I have recently been working on, right? And it keeps I think this one might stay here if I remember right, but I believe it keeps your last 3 recent projects saved here. Now the really nice thing is that it's a great shortcut, right? The really bad thing that we sort of discussed last time is that if you accidentally open the wrong project or you open up a backup file and don't realize it, you could continue to open up the wrong file over and over and over and over again, right? Because it's stuck in recent documents. So me kind of being a little bit, we'll say, old-fashioned with drafting technology, I tend, and I'll do it here, which is maybe a bad habit, but when I'm working on things on my own, I tend not to use this section, even though it's extremely convenient, right? So when I open up projects, I will go to Open, and I will browse to wherever that project is actually saved, and it will open it from its saved location, right, just to be safe. But this is essentially the Revit startup screen. So this is where you're going to begin a new project, okay? And let me say this, you're going to begin a new project outside of the actual Revit interface. So let me start a new project, and I'm just going to start a new project from one of the templates, all right? So I'm going to open up the architectural template here, and to do that I can just click on it, architectural template, click, and it thinks for a second, and it opens up, and there is nothing here. All right, I'm going to just create a couple of things. Don't worry about doing this. I'm just going to create something so that we can sort of see something on our screen. Hello. But essentially, these are blank templates. Okay, and what the term template means, if you have never used any computer drafting software, is that a template, it is a file that has a lot of preset items in it that are applicable to whatever your task is, right? So I opened up the architectural template, which means that I'm going to have a lot of things in this file that are defined to create an architectural project. Right? So I'll have predefined windows and doors and wall types and floors and roofs. Okay. I'll also have views of my model created that make sense for an architectural project. All right. If I were to open up the mechanical template, there would be things more tuned towards the beginning of a mechanical type project. All right. And the same thing for, excuse me, for a construction project, right? The architectural project template is a little bit more tuned for a commercial project. If you're wondering what the difference between a construction and an architectural project is, the construction template is more tuned for a residential project. So that's going to be the difference between the two. But I have my file open here. I just want to today go through all of the things that essentially that we see on screen. Okay, so I'm going to define all of the different areas here and show you how those sort of function. And again, you're not going to have an assignment likely until next week, just because I feel like we need to have a lot of definition of things before we can actually get going on an assignment. Okay, so I'm going to just show you where things are, and then we'll go back and we'll target them and define things in here. So the first thing I want to define its location. We have a file menu here, and it actually looks like a little tab. Okay. Now, if you're using an older version of Revit, like 2017, and I think even 2018, well, maybe it was 2018 when it changed. 2016, 2017, this big R right here it functions as this little file tab. Okay. So if you use the older versions, you're going to see a slight difference in the interface. But right now, this little tab right here that's called File, if I click on it, I get a menu that opens up, a tool palette that opens up, and it has a lot of system type settings in it. So if I want to open a new file, if I want to open an existing file, if I want to save a project, save as a project, export a project to a different format, print, close, go to options within my Revit interface. This file tab is where I'm going to click. All right. You're probably thinking, well, a lot of this functionality is on that main Revit page when I open the software, and it is, right? Just like AutoCAD, when you want to perform an action in AutoCAD, there's always about 3 or 4 different ways to do it, right? And Revit is no different. So I could start a new file by clicking here, new project, click, and it would create a new project, and it would allow me to select from a template or whatever. But I could also access this through that welcome page that Revit has, right? Okay, so I'm gonna hit escape. Just like AutoCAD, escape is our get out of jail free card. So if you ever get stuck in anything, if you're in a menu and you don't want to be there, if you want to clear out a dimension or a command that you're working on, escape is going to be the button that you push. All right. Okay. So the first thing I want to define to talk about, we have a drawing area here. So we have our file menu, we have a drawing area here, we have a properties dialog box over here. Okay, you see this very top area, and I'm going to undock these toolbars and show you what they look like on their own. But right now I have 1, 2 tool palettes, one stacked on the other. The first is properties, and I'm just going to drag it over here so we can look at it. Okay, and then the next one is my project browser. So here's my project browser. All right, and I'll talk about these differences of these things in a minute. I have my ribbon up here at the very top, these tabbed areas. This is called the ribbon, right? And AutoCAD has a ribbon now. Used to have a bunch of tool bars, and a lot of softwares have ribbons now, right? Like the Adobe has ribbons, Microsoft has ribbons. A lot of the softwares now that you use They have a ribbon with tabs, and the tabs contain commands on them. All right. We have our quick access toolbar up here at the top. We have our view cube navigation over here. Right now I'm only seeing kind of like the little shortcut menu, but I do have a view cube that I can turn on, that we'll turn on. We have our information center, and that is right here. I don't access this a whole lot, but essentially this will allow you to connect to online features, right? It will allow you to sign in with your Autodesk username. So if you want to render or do anything, there you can do that. We have our view control bar down here at the bottom. Oops. It is this little guy down here. We have our options toolbar. Now, this a lot of times will only pop up when we are in a command, so it's not showing right now, but our options toolbar will appear in this space right here. Let me show you. If I initiate a command, do you see this, right, how that popped up? All of those settings popped up. This is our options or our modify toolbar here. Okay. I'm going to hit escape. I have two other areas I want to talk about. Well, and in fact, I'm going to maybe skip one of them right now until we get to it. I have, well, no, I'll talk about it now. I have our switch window icon. Okay, there's only one open, which is kind of boring for right now. But this is our switch window icon here. Okay, and then finally, I have sort of a small command line in Revit. Although it doesn't function the same as AutoCAD, right? AutoCAD has a command line that you input commands into, and it also leads you through commands. I do have a small command line here, but it's not a command line that I can input information into. It's purely informational. So it will lead me through commands, but it will not allow me to input anything in there, okay? So those are the areas we're really going to sort of worry about right now. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to define what all of these things do for us, right, as we're working. Any questions so far on anything? Not too bad yet, right? All right, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is the project browser, all right? The project browser is this tool palette right here. I'm going to pull these, I'm undocking them right now, essentially, just so that you can sort of see that they are independent of one another. But this is our project browser right here. And our project browser, it organizes all of our elements, our view elements in Revit, essentially. So you're going to see things like all of our views, right? The views of our model, okay? So you'll see floor plan, and here are the views of our floor plan, level 1 and 2. We have ceiling plans. Well, here's the views of our ceiling plans, level 1 and 2. Here are elevation views, north, south, east, and west. Okay, we have legends, schedules, and then we skip down here to sheets. This is where sheets will be generated if we have any. Let me just create one for us. Here is one of our sheets. Okay, so the project browser really organizes all of the views, right? Whether they're pure views like a floor plan or they're sheets. And like I said in class last time, everything that we do in Revit is in one file. So we generate geometry, we view views, we create sheets, we annotate. All of those things happen in one file, essentially. So to use our project browser, we're going to double click. Okay, so if I want to see level 1 floor plan in my model, click, and I go to that view. If I want to see level 2, click, and I go to level 2. If I want to see the ceiling plan, click, there's my ceiling plan, right? We don't have a whole lot of things happening in this model right now, so there's not a lot to view, right? But if you wanted to, that is how you're going to navigate through your project, okay? As we create views, which you will learn how to do, they all appear here. And to access them, click, north, click, east, right? Click, south, click, west. There we go. All right. Okay, so I'm going to give you a short lecture now just so that if you want to navigate through some of these views, I'm going to show you how to navigate on the screen very quickly, all right? Navigation in our drawing space in Revit, which is this area right here, is very similar to AutoCAD. So if you've navigated around model space in AutoCAD, the workflow is the same in Revit. So if I want to zoom in Revit, on my mouse, I have a little roller button, right? And if I hover over this white space and I roll my mouse away from me, I zoom in. And if I roll my mouse towards me, the little roller, I zoom out. Okay, so I zoom in, I zoom out. And if I want to bring, if I'm zoomed in, for example, but I want to bring the entire drawing back onto my screen, which is called a zoom extent, I double click my roller twice very quickly. Click, click, and it brings me to zoom extents. I zoom in, I zoom out, click, click the middle button twice, and I zoom extents. Okay. I can also pan in my drawing space. To pan means to move your drawing across your drawing space. If I hold my middle roller button, the little roller down, if I hold it down and I move my mouse, this is panning. Okay, so I zoom in, I zoom out, I double click my roller twice very quickly to zoom extents, and then I can pan. All right, and I want to remind you, you hit escape, 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 escape. I always do it a few times to clear out any command you're in, whether it's a zoom, it's a drawing command, whatever it is. Escape, escape clears me out of my command. Okay. All right. Any questions on our project browser or navigation around the drawing screen? Okay. So you're going to be using your project browser a lot. Let's say that, right? Whenever you want to switch between views or you want to find a view to add detail or drawing, this is where you're going to go. Okay. Now I want to just point one thing out. Each of these views, right, which is how we look at our Revit model, right? We have a 3D model here. When we want to, for example, view the level 1 floor plan, we're viewing our model at level 1, right? So this level 1 floor plan right here corresponds to this level 1 that is defined, all right? And a floor plan is defined as a horizontal cut 3 to 4 feet above the actual level of the floor plan, right? So what that means is if we were in this room and you were to view a floor plan of this room that we're in, right, you would be viewing it as if you had cut the floor plate at 3 to 4 feet, right, horizontally. You were to slice it and take everything above it off, okay? And you're viewing looking down. That's what a floor plan means. A horizontal cut across the building at 3 to 4 feet, and you're viewing downward, all right? So right now, excuse me, let me just draw a little line here, okay? I'm going to put a dimension on this line so you can visually see. When I double click on level 1 floor plan, you know, I'm not doing it, but if I click on level 1 floor plan here, what I'm actually viewing is level 1, right, defined by this marker, and I'm actually viewing it at 3 feet above level 1, looking down. That's my floor plate, okay? When I look at level 2, I'm going to copy this up here. When I look at level 2, right, which is level 2 over here, I'm looking at level 2, but I'm looking at it 3 feet above, looking down, essentially. Okay, that's how our model is going to work, essentially. Any questions about any of that so far? Okay. So we know what our project browser is. We know where it is. One thing I want to show you is what happens if it disappears, okay, which happens all the time. What happens if I accidentally click on this little close and you're like, wait a minute, where are all of my views? Where's my project browser? It's missing. Okay, panic ensues. To get that turned back on, I'm going to go up here. This is one thing that you'll want to remember. I'm going to go up here to my View tab. I'm going to come all the way to the end here to User Interface. Click down on that. And you'll notice that I have a bunch of things that are check marked here. Anything that's checked marked is showing. Okay, so properties is check marked, properties is showing. Status bar is checked marked, status bar is showing. Let's see, my navigation bar, I've got that check marked, that is showing. So you'll notice that my project browser is not checked, so it's not showing, but if I click on it, it pops back up. Okay, so that'll be one pretty important thing. If you ever lose your properties dialog box, if you ever lose your project browser, if something turns off, that's likely where you're going to go to find it to turn it back on. Okay, sorry guys. Let's talk about our properties dialog box here. Now, before I do that, I want to show you one other thing that wasn't very evident because I didn't have any views open. But you will likely, or maybe you did, or maybe you didn't notice, but as I double clicked on each of these different views in my project browser here, and I opened them up to view them, right, a little tab opened up. Okay. The way that Revit works is that every time I double click on a view, let me click on level 1, click. Okay, a tab opens. This is my current tab that I'm on, level 1. And it is on the top, we'll say it's on the top of all of the other views that I used to have open. So if I continue to open up views, click, okay. Some of these are already open, so they've already stacked. But essentially when I open a new view, that view comes to the front of my views, and all of the other views that I previously had open stack behind it, all right? In previous versions of Revit, you would only see this current view and it would say like south elevation, right? And all of these other views would be invisible to you. So if you're in a previous version of Revit like 2016, 2017, the interface is just the tiniest bit different. Right now, I see my current view, and then I see all of these tabs that are then stacked below that current view. If I want to access those views, I just click, and I go to that view, essentially. Okay, I can close out these views by clicking on them. And I don't want you to think that because I close out of a view that I close the project, because I don't. I can close out all of these. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, right? I can close all of them but one, and the project remains open. Okay. Oh, it looks like I have that one. And I just have my south elevation open now at this point. All right. So if I were to close the south elevation, it would say, hey, would you like to save the file? And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hit escape. But those tabs will start to stack up as you browse through your views, and that's totally fine. All right, so let's talk about properties. Our properties dialog box here, it shows definitions. It shows all definition, really, of different objects within Revit. Okay, and it shows the definition of any object within Revit. So, and it changes depending on what object I have selected. So right now, I have a building elevation view open. I don't have anything selected on my screen, and so the properties dialog box is giving me properties about the view I currently have open. All right, so it's telling me the scale and the display model and the detail level and the coarseness and visibility graphics and the phase and all that good stuff. The second that I select something by clicking on it, click, you notice that because this is a wall, right, now it tells me properties about that wall. So this tells me that the wall type is a generic 8-inch wall. It tells me that its location line is its center line. It tells me that its base constraint is level 1, so its base starts at level 1. It tells me that its top constraint is unconnected, meaning there's no top definition, but that it's 20 feet tall. So I get all of the different properties about that object when I select it. Okay, if I hit escape, it goes away, right? So this is something that it's not only informational, but when you start drawing things, it allows you to select what type of object you want to draw with. All right, meaning if I want to draw a wall, I can initiate the wall command. I then engage the properties dialog box to select the wall type that I want to draw. Then I draw my wall in my drawing space. Okay, once that wall is drawn, like this wall right here, right, I can click on it and I can see exactly what wall I had chosen. I can see all of its properties. And then I can also, if I need to, change it. Okay, so you notice that changed a little bit, and now I have a brick wall. All right, let me go, I'm going to pop into 3D here. Just show you some different views of things. Okay, so I clicked on my wall. I was able to view the properties, and the properties also allows me to drop down and change that wall if I want. There's another brick wall. Okay. And we'll test all these things out, don't worry. Again, this is somewhat of an informational class right now, just for today. You'll start practicing these things very soon, but I just want you to understand where all this stuff is and how it sort of functions before we actually begin drawing. Okay. I'm going to close my 3D view, right? I come back up to my tabs, close my 3D view. Now I'm back in that elevation that I was looking at before we changed to 3D. Okay. So properties dialog box, pretty important. It allows me to choose what I'm drawing, and it also gives me a lot of information about the project, right? I reference the properties dialog box all the time for different things. All right, let's talk about the ribbon now. All right, the ribbon is this area up here. Okay, it is tabbed. So when I click on these different tabs, right, I get different things happening. Okay, but essentially the functionality of the ribbon is it contains all of the different tools that I need to use to create or annotate a construction project, a construction drawing project. Okay, and each of these tabs organize all of those tools within the ribbon. So under the architecture tab, which would be very similar to the draw menu in AutoCAD, right? I have all of my drawing tools for different building elements. Okay, so not only do I have tools that I'm going to use organized onto each of these tabs, I then have them organized into tool palettes within each of those tabs. So on the architecture tab, I have the build tool palette, and the build tool palette contains building elements that I'm going to draw in my model, right? Walls, doors, windows, components, columns, roof, ceiling, floors, all of those major things that I need to build a model, right? Makes sense. Then I have my circulation tool palette here, right? So here, it allows me to create circulation within my project. So ramps, stairs, railings. You guys get the idea, right? Some of these other things may not make sense as to what they are, but I have model elements, I have room and area elements, I have openings and datums. A datum is a way to set or measure our different heights or widths or things in the project. And a datum is going to be like a level. These are levels, right? So if I want to generate a data marker, a level, I would come up to my level command, and it would allow me to create a new level down here, right? So the tabs that you're likely going to be using the most will be architecture. You'll be using insert, annotate, collaborate, view, manage, and modify. The version of Revit that we have the full version of architectural Revit here, and it does contain commands for other disciplines. So we do have some structural tabs, right? So, right, whatever these mean. We have some more structural, we have systems like mechanical systems, different things like that. So we do have some other type elements that we'll be using in here that we could use potentially if you were in a different discipline, okay? But in general, we're going to be just using the architectural elements in this course. So just know that there will be some tabs with commands on them in the ribbon that you don't necessarily use, all right? The way the ribbon functions, we have a command. These are all icons, right? So And when we get into actually generating these things, I'll show you how to initiate them using an icon or a button, but I'll also show you how to initiate them using the keyboard, right? So I have the wall command here. I can click on the wall command to initiate the command, but you'll also notice that next to its description there, it says WA, right? So I have a keyboard shortcut associated with each of those ribbon commands, generally speaking. Some don't, but most do, all right? I am a keyboard person. I like to input things with my keyboard. I don't like to take I'm very lazy, right? I don't like to take my mouse all the way from over here where I'm working all the way up here, search through tabs to find an icon, to then click on it, to initiate it, to go back down here, right? I feel like it's a very slow workflow to go that way. I would much prefer just to be in my working environment, type WA and draw a wall, right? I think it's a lot quicker. Those of you that have had me for AutoCAD, I tell you this, my husband, he's a button guy. So he likes to have every button, icon, tool palette, menu he can possibly have open on his other screen. And he searches for buttons and he clicks on them, right? It's very visual. And I think it just is terribly slow. I don't like it. So, so you'll see me a lot of times using the keyboard shortcut for a command. And when I do, I'll tell you. I'll say, let's draw a wall, WA. Right? Or you'll see me take my mouse and physically all the way up here, click on wall, and then go back down here and draw the wall. Okay. But essentially the ribbon just really contains all of our drawing commands. Our drawing commands, our annotation commands, some project management commands, but any command that we're going to need in Revit, we're going to find in the ribbon. All right. Just above the ribbon, we have a quick access toolbar here. And this quick access toolbar shows some of the most commonly used commands in Revit, right? And it can be customized. So these are just somewhat the out-of-the-box quick access commands, which I've gotten used to. I actually don't change them because number one, I use my keyboard shortcuts if I want to shortcut a command, right? But number two, I've just kind of gotten used to what they have here, and I feel like it kind of makes sense. So we have things like open, save, undo, the lifesaver, undo, right? And it's even more fantastic than AutoCAD because if I click this little down arrow, I have a sequence of my undos, which is really nice, which you don't see in AutoCAD. I have undo and I have redo. I have print, I have measure. So this is like distance in AutoCAD. I have dimension, keynote, text. The biggest one that there's probably 2 or 3 of these I use the most. This one is a 3D view. So you'll see me say, I'm going to pop into 3D mode. I come up here, I click on this little house, click, and I pop into 3D mode. Okay. That is the same thing as coming over here to your project browser and clicking on 3D view. Click, click. It's the same thing. Right? I open the same view. It's just a shortcut to there. Okay. I have a sectional tool, which we don't have available just right now. I also have a thin lines command. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to go to my level 1 floor plan so you can see it a little bit easier. Do you notice that I'm getting a preview of my line weights in my floor plan view? Right, so my outer lines of my wall look very thick, the inner lines of the wall look thin, right? I'm getting a graphic representation on my screen of my line weights, right? This thin lines, if I click on it, it takes that preview away. Click, click. There's also a keyboard shortcut, TL, which I use probably more than anything, but that will allow me to remove that graphic representation. Now, if I were to print, it doesn't physically take it away, right? So the line weights will always print. Thick lines look thick, thin lines look thin, always when I print. But I don't have to view them on the screen if I don't want to. And there's going to be times where it's easier to have the line weights turned off when you're placing geometry. And it's going to be nice sometimes when they're on so you can see what's happening with them, right? One thing, if you've had AutoCAD before and you're looking at it thinking, well, how did those line weights get defined, right? Who told Revit this was a thick line and who told Revit that this was a thin line? Well, the beauty about Revit is that they're inherently defined in objects. So In AutoCAD, we have to very manually go in and create layers and assign those layers colors, and then we have to use a pen file to print in order to make those thicknesses show up on our drawings. In Revit, these are inherently defined for objects. And I think generally they're pretty good. So I tend to not change those either, right? I think Revit is it's not highly customized when you purchase it or whatever, or use it as a student and just out of the box. I don't think it's, it's not highly customized, but it is defined well enough that you can go in there and you can just start working, which is one of my favorite things, right? AutoCAD is very generic. So if you don't have a template set up and you want to work, there's a lot of settings you have to really define up front before you can start a project, okay? And so what I like and appreciate about Revit is that some of that is already defined. So I don't spend so much time in the setup mode. I can begin working and then kind of work on the setup as I go, essentially, okay? But again, those of you that have had AutoCAD and had to define your line weights, it's like, happy days are here. Our line weights are inherent, and when I draw something, Revit knows what line weight to assign to it. So, but I can turn that preview off if I need to. Okay. I have close hidden window, or close inactive window. I guess they've changed it to inactive because they're not technically hidden. But if I have several of these windows stacked open behind my current window, right, I am allowed to come up here and click on this little close inactive window. And if you watch right here, all of those close. Okay. I've never really kind of gotten to the point where I feel like I have so many views open that Revit maybe bogs down. It never really has affected my workflow. But when I want to tile my windows, which I'll show you how to do down the road, it does affect that. So that's why I will open and close windows to manipulate my view, more so than I have 30 views open and it's bogging down my workflow, because it doesn't normally do that. Going back to our quick access toolbar, right? The way that this is used is I come up here, I click on whatever quick access I need, click, and that's it, right? That's how the quick access toolbar functions. It just allows you a quick snapshot or a quick access to one or two different commands. You can customize this. I can use this little drop down, and I can check mark, commands on and off, the ones that I use and don't use. And I can also choose customize quick access toolbar right here. And I can pick ones that I want to add or remove, okay? Again, I don't tend to change them very often because maybe I've just gotten used to the ones that are there, but I do feel like this selection is kind of makes sense, I guess. All right, any questions so far? Okay. So let's talk about the view control tool palette now, which is at the bottom of the screen. So we're going from the top of the screen all the way to the bottom. This is our view control bar down here. And this controls visual things about the view that we're working on. So things like the scale of the view we're working on. And let me change to I'm going to go to an elevation view. All right. It changes the scale. Right, so if I click on this, I can change to 1/4 of an inch. The magic just happened right there, right? My annotation also went to 1/4 of an inch scale. This again is one of those aha wonderful moments for those of you that have used AutoCAD. Look how nicely the annotation changes when I change the scale of my Revit drawing. It's just all automatic, it's all built in, right? There's no going back and having to alter any type of annotation, which is wonderful. But I can change the scale, okay? I can change the coarseness level of my view. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means, I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit. That means that different levels of detail will be shown in my view. So for example, right now, if I click on this, I have coarse chosen, meaning I just see a very coarse view of my building elements. If I choose medium, I start to see more detail in my building elements. And if there's any more definition to be given on fine, it will reveal it. There wasn't here in this case, but if there is, it will show it. I'm not going to worry about the sun. I'm not going to worry about the shadows here, okay? I am going to show you, one thing, sorry. I skipped over one thing here. I skipped over the actual visual style. So the actual visual style here is what the geometry looks like on the screen. So if I click on this, if I want to change to shaded, I get a shaded view, right? If I click on this and I want to go to a hidden line, there's my hidden line. If I want to go to wireframe, I can go to wireframe, okay? So you can't really see the wireframe view here. Let's change, there's wireframe right there, right? Here is shaded. Here is hidden. These also have keyboard shortcuts. So shaded is SD, hidden line is HL, wireframe is WF, right? So again, very rarely do I take all of my time to come all the way down here to squint at this tiny little icon, right? to make it, to change the visual style. I'll use my keyboard shortcuts. And you're like, well, why would I ever change that? Well, there are instances where it just allows you to view the model a little bit easier, right? You'll see me sometimes drafting in shaded view just so I can differentiate different things, you know, because they're different colors in the model. These things won't make a whole lot of sense to you today, but they will in the future. And that is our crop boundary and our hide hidden elements. So if I click on this little icon, will allow you to crop or not crop the view, okay? This little icon right here shows my crop boundary or crop region, right? It's kind of like a viewport if you're comparing it to AutoCAD, but essentially this defines the extent of your drawing view, okay? So if there were any drawings outside of here right now, and I have my region cropped cropped, then I wouldn't see any drawing outside of here. So this boundary really defines what I'm going to view in my drawing, okay? I have my these little sunglasses right here, the temporary hide isolate. So this will allow me to turn objects visually on and off as I'm working. I have my reveal hidden elements, which will allow me to see elements that have been turned off or hidden from my view, okay? And we're not going to worry about any of these things over here. But essentially, just like its name, this is the view control bar. Okay, so I come down here to control visual aspects of each of the views that I'm working on. All right. Okay. All right, so we've talked about the quick access toolbar, the ribbon. We've talked about, oh, now I'm spacing on the name of that one. That is the... Let's see, the information center, that's what it is. See, I never go there, that's why. The information center, the visual control bar, project browser, yep.
Excuse me.
Hello.
Sorry to interrupt.
You guys know Kevin? This is Kevin.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, hold on, Kevin. I'm gonna.
So I can grab, you still have the pins in there, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep, they're just on the desk.
Back.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt this marvelous discussion today inside of the best software.
Uh-oh. Kevin's, yeah. We won't use the term hater.
I'm extremely biased, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I admit it.
I know. I still fight the good AutoCAD fight. Kevin has given up. All right. There we go. Ooh, good. I had paused our video. Okay. Those are the most important parts of the Revit interface. One place that I did forget to mention, which I mentioned earlier, is our drawing board, right? So this space in here is our drawing board, and that's where we draw all of our model geometry. That's where it all occurs. And just like in AutoCAD, it's an infinite drawing board. And that means that when I draw things there, I draw them at real world scale, okay? So if a building is 200 feet by 200 feet, I draw it 200 feet by 200 feet. I don't try to scale it down or make it smaller, thinking oh, Revit's really tiny. I can't draw everything the right size. No, it's not true. Revit has adequate space on its drawing board to draw things the actual size that they should be. Okay, so here's our drawing board, and we draw things to the actual size that they are in the real world. All right, we draw things according to how we define them in Revit, meaning, and generally in the United States, we'll say, and in an architectural application, we draw things in feet and inches. Okay, we don't use the metric system. So in our Revit drawing space here, we're going to be using feet and inches to draw things. Okay. Speaking of feet and inches, right? How do we make sure that our Revit interface is defined to accept those units, right? So when I type in 6 foot 4 inches, Revit understands 6 foot 4 inches. Okay. I'm going to go to my units, and I'm going to type UN. Okay, UN is the keyboard shortcut for project units. And I believe you can tell that I don't use the ribbon very much because you'll find me searching for hidden commands sometimes where I've learned the keyboard shortcut and that's all I need. Under the Manage tab, we also have project units here, right? Click. All right, so here I can look and I can see that all of the different types of units that are used for each of the different measurements in Revit, essentially. And there's a lot of them, right? So we have length, looks pretty good to me, feet and inches. Although I don't know all of you, who's in construction trades again? We have a few in here, right? Who measures to the 11/32 of an inch when you're, no, right? No. So I'm going to change that just a tiny bit. And I'm going to see that I'm rounding to the nearest 1/32. It's kind of a tiny little increment, right? Maybe if you're doing millwork or something, you might need something that small. But I think I'm going to change this maybe to 1/4 of an inch. I think that's probably pretty accurate enough in architectural drawings, okay? So I'm going to change my rounding to the nearest 1/4 inch. I'm going to hit OK. And I'm just going to leave the area volume. I'm going to leave all these other things alone because I know that they're adequately defined. I'm going to hit OK. And I now know that my units have been defined as they should be. Okay. One thing I do also want to define while we're on the topic of units is that in Revit, the foot is the default unit, right? This takes some getting used to when you've been using AutoCAD, where the inch is the default unit, okay? And what that means is that when I am in AutoCAD and I'm drawing things, if I just type 10, enter, and I'm drawing a line, it will draw a 10-inch line by default in AutoCAD, right? In Revit, if I type 10, enter, it will draw a 10-foot line because foot is the default unit in Revit, okay? So I think it's kind of the strangest thing ever because now, I mean, Autodesk owns both Revit and AutoCAD. I don't know why they can't be the same, but it's just something you'll have to get used to, okay? So in AutoCAD, the inch is the default unit. In Revit, the foot is the default unit. Okay, any questions so far? All right. So we just have a couple more things we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about how you're going to save a file, how you're going to specify the backups, and I think really that's going to be all for today. I'm not going to assign an assignment just yet, although I might post a quiz for you guys to take. And the quiz will likely, I'll just make it a surprise, right? But no, I won't make it a surprise. I'll make it on the syllabus, okay? So I usually have a syllabus quiz at the beginning of each of my courses, and I pick specific things that I just want you to make sure that you know. So I'll post the quiz on Canvas. You'll take it on Canvas, and I don't mind if you look at the syllabus or use your notes or whatever to accomplish the quiz. That doesn't bother me, right? Because in industry, you always have your notes. You always have your book. You always have the internet to search things, right? So I don't mind, and I won't time it either. But I will post it on Canvas, so just make sure you watch for that, and make sure that you just notice when it's due by, okay? All right, So one more thing for today, and that's going to be how to save a Revit file once you've started a new file and how to specify your backup files. All right. We talked about sort of the extension on a Revit file and backup files and how they look in a file folder. And if you've forgotten that since Monday, here we are, right? So we have our working Revit file, .rvt, and we have our backup files that get saved in that same file as the working file, which, you know, my opinion on that, I don't like that. A backup file is distinguished from a working file in that it has this 4-digit suffix on it, right? So I have the name of the file, a period, 4 numbers, another period, and then an RVT extension, right? Even though these are not technically the working files, right, they still have the same extension. Another extension type, there's 2 other really common extension types you will see in Revit. One is the RFA, that's a Revit family, okay? So doors, windows, different things like that, those will have an RFA extension. And you'll also see a template file extension, so RTE. So we have RVT, the working file. We have RTE, the template file, right? The template file meaning the architectural, the construction, the mechanical templates. And then we have these backup files, okay? They still have the RVT extension, but they have this numeric thing added to it, right? So I'm going to delete all these though, in fact. There we go. Okay. So how do we save our Revit file? Well, we have a lot of ways to do that. Control S, we have our little, isn't it funny, it's our little floppy disk. Nobody uses floppy disks anymore. Or I can go to File and I can hit Save, which I'll just do here, Save. So this is the first time I've saved this file, so it asks me where would you like to save it. So I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to go to my folder where I save everything. Okay, 2019 Revit. I'm going to give it a name. Let's see. We'll give it a long name. Okay. Before I hit save though, I'm going to check and see how many backup files are generating for this project. I would say that likely 3 backup files, that's pretty adequate for a project. The one that I had done before had 10 running. It's excessive, right? 10 backup files is excessive, especially for the type of projects we're doing, right? Maybe if you had well, I'm not even going to say that because I don't think they do even with gigantic multi-million-dollar, you know, huge projects. You would think that maybe a few more would be good, but it just gets confusing, right? So I think 3 backup files is adequate for any Revit project. And to specify that, you're going to click on Options here. And you can only do this the first time that you save your project. So if you accidentally forget and have a bunch of backups running, you're going to be with them for a long time, okay? It's not detrimental. It's just kind of an organizational problem, right? But the first time I save it, I give it a name, and I click on Options, and it shows, oh, this one does only have 3 running, so that looks pretty good. If it had 10, you would just type in 3 right there. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to hit Save, and that's how I'm going to save my file, okay? So if I look at my file structure right now, I only have 1 file, but every time, let's see if I can get this split screen going a little bit. Every time I hit Control S in my Revit file, Control S, you see a backup file starts to generate. Control S, Control S. This actually is 4. I bet one will disappear. So it's like I have an active save and then it saves over the top of the backup file. And they change number, right, every single time I hit save. Okay. Okay, so that's what my file structure will start to look like. You just have to be, again, I can't warn you enough, just be very careful with the files that you open because very, very easily you can lose a lot of work, right? So you just have to be very careful. Another little bit of advice I would like to give you on your files. When you're naming your files, it's also very tempting, like I put dates on a lot of my files, right? So I'll do like 01/07 2019, right? Don't put periods anywhere in your file naming. So don't do 01 period, you know, 02 period 2019 and then do the name and then continue on. Because if you put periods in your naming, Revit may confuse that period as the designation for your extension, right? So right here I have that period that separates my name of my file from my file extension, right? And if you put a period somewhere in the naming convention, it can get confused and corrupt your file. I haven't had that happen in Revit because I don't do it anymore, but at a firm that I used to work at, we would do that frequently with dates, and we put periods in the dates, and then we started having files corrupt. So it is really kind of a real thing. So don't put periods in any of your file naming conventions, okay? All right. So no assignment, but look for a quiz. It won't be a very long quiz, maybe 5 to 10 questions, and you can use your notes to accomplish it. That will be fine with me. When we get back, remember next week on Monday is a holiday. I know that, let's see, we don't have class on Monday. This is our Monday class. So when we are back on Wednesday, so I'll see you a week from today, we'll start talking about the modeling process. I'll have, navigation and modeling, and I will give you an assignment for that next week, okay? So this one I will assign with a real date, starting a new file. Then we'll talk about navigation and selection a little bit, and then I'm going to show you how to start modeling, and you will have an assignment for the modeling portion, okay? So, yep.
Are you going to change the dates on the assignment because those are...
Yeah. Yep, I will. When we get to them, yes. Okay. Any other questions?